Yeah, come on, I believe it. And so, and getting there, we're what 3 weeks out from celebrating our 1 year anniversary as a church. Come on, 1 year of ministry. And we've seen God do some incredible things. So I'm going to tell you two things right now. Number one, don't forget next week is at the Lake Town Park. Everybody look at your neighbor and say next week. Next week is our Lake Town Park worship experience. And then on August 20th, we have a 10 a.m. and a 6 p.m. experience for you here. It's our 1 year celebration, and we got some exciting things to announce to you. So I want you to be here. I can't tell you right now. You're just going to have to get here on August 20th at one of those experiences you don't want to miss. But next week, what's cool about next week and why you want to come, I know a lot of people are like, man, it's going to be hot out there. I know. I promise you I'm not going to preach for 40 minutes. I'm going to preach for like 10 or 15 minutes and out of there. And we're going to get out of there. But if you can make it, because I'm going to give you a sneak peek into our new sermon series coming up called Into the Wilderness. That's what we're going to be talking about next, the wilderness. And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek next week. But for now, we're still in James. And we've been going week by week in James. And we're starting chapter 4. So we've finished 3 chapters of it. I think we've been in it for at least 10 to 12 weeks now. And James chapter, we've learned, if you've learned a lot from James, let me see you. You've been enjoying that series. You've been enjoying learning from it. James has some cool stuff to teach. And in this passage right here, he's basically going to continue talking about the fighting that's happening in the local church. Remember, if you the Jewish nation, they're being oppressed, and so they're dispersed out. And because they're probably feeling all that pressure, they're trying to get the local church started, but there's a lot of fighting, a lot of conflict happening. So we've seen James talking about the tongue and how we need to try to discipline our tongue as much as we can. And we've seen him do some other things as well. And talking just basically about that fighting. And right here, as we go into James 4, he's continuing that thought, but he's doing it in a rhetorical form of questions called a diatribe. If you ever heard of a diatribe is a long, angry speech that is usually meant to be critical towards a certain group. And so as much, James is a leader, and sometimes, if you're a leader, you got to be stern with your people to get in it. But come from a place of grace. I believe that when James wrote this, he was coming from a place of grace, not from a place that was very condemning. But he was coming from a place of grace, but he was being stern and direct. Because I believe that this problem of fighting and quarreling was hurting their ability and their potential to reach more people for Jesus. Could you imagine, if you look around the room right now, if we were all fighting in here? People didn't like each other, so you weren't sitting apart from each other. And then after service, we had to separate a few fights out and stuff like that. If new people walked through the door and saw that, there's no way we could do what God's called us to do and witness to them. And so it's really an extreme issue that we talk about. That's why Paul talks about unity so much. He took the whole chapter in Ephesians to talk about how the church should be in unity with one another. And so James is addressing this very issue. So if you're taking notes, which I hope that you are, I want to talk to you today from this topic, the source of conflicts. Look at your neighbor and say, the source of conflicts. When I was about 12 years old, I'd say 12, 13, I was in 8th grade, I had talked my parents into letting me play on an AAU basketball team. I loved basketball, and I loved traveling. It was pretty fun. And so I got involved with this basketball team, and we would play all. If you don't know what AAU is it's a competitive tournament league, basically, where instead of playing for the high school team during the high school year, during the summer you play AAU. A lot of people get scouted out of there and stuff like that. So I was playing with the team, and I was really excited because we were doing pretty well, and then we were headed to Texas in Houston, Texas, for a tournament, right? And so we get to Texas, we get there, and I'm 12 years old. Remember, I'm not just there to play basketball. I'm there to have a good time. I mean, I'm 12 years old. I get to go on a little trip. If you ever played sports growing up and you got to go stay in a hotel room or something like that with your friends, You usually end up probably having to pay for, your parents usually have to pay for a bill after because you done tore up the room somehow. You did something. But anyways, the problem with what happened with me, and look, I'm going to just tell you right now, I'm going to be super honest with you today and super open. And so you don't have to, at least you don't have to shout it from the stage. So you got to be open with yourself if you want to see some application and see some change in your life right there. I'm about to be open with you from stage. And so about some issues that I have. And I had an issue when I was 12 years old. And and so my aunt lived in Houston, Texas. Same place we were going. So my mom was like, hey, we're just going to stay at our aunt, my sister's house because we haven't seen her that much. I was like, not really liking the idea. And then I got taken to the hotel that the guys were staying at. And they were staying in this like 5-star hotel. I remember walking to the lobby and looking around. I was like, this is so cool. Like, it was like awesome to go to a hotel when you're 12 years old. I don't know why. But I was there and I was looking around. And I was like, this is so cool. And I ran over to my parents and I said, look, I know you guys want to stay with Aunt Robin. Get it. You guys go stay with them. I want to stay here at the hotel room with my friends and hang out and stuff like that. And you know the answer they told me? No. They gave me a big, flat no. And guys, I was so angry. I mean, you ever know how you get so angry sometimes? Even if it was years ago, you remember vividly what happened because you were that angry. I was angry, guys. Like, I was so angry because I was like, all these other kids are getting to go in the hotel room. Why can't I do it? Like, I want to be there with all my friends, and I'm got to be the oddball that's left out. Everybody's going to think I'm weird because I'm not staying at the hotel, and they're going to think that I hate them. And I'm just like, all these thoughts are running through my head, and I'm getting really mad. And I remember getting in the vehicle, driving from the hotel back to my aunt's house, and we just, guys, if I could tell you, it was probably one of the worst fights I ever gotten. I just remember acting like a hooligan. Like, I can honestly tell you that I was like, if I have a child now and he acts the way I did, I'm going to pray for myself. I was like, like it was, I was just screaming and I was dramatic and I was like, you guys are the problem, pointing it all at them. And so I didn't get what I want. And it didn't take me till years later to realize, with a little bit of maturity in my life, that if I look back at that issue now, that I used to say the problem was them because they say no. But now I can go back and I can see where they're coming from. And the reason that whole thing turned into such a bigger conflict than it did before was because of me, because of what I did. And James right here, he's giving you the answer to this in the first verse. He's telling you where the source of conflicts lay. He's telling you, he says, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? And then he says, in its rhetorical form, and then he just kind of answers it, is it not this, that you are at war with the passions inside of you, with the things inside of you? So you know what the source of the conflict is? It's you. It's me. The source of, look at your neighbor right now so we can all be honest in the house and say, the source of the conflict is me. The source of the conflict is me. It's me. That might have just settled some marital issues in the house right there. You just take the blame. But the source of the conflict is me. How many times do we know? You remember James just got done talking about the wisdom from above, but that wisdom from above is not what? It's not selfish ambition. But how many times that we get in conflicts in our life and we get in arguments with our friends, with our family members, with our wives, and if you would just take back and take a step back, look from a different perspective and realize maybe it's you that's being super selfish that's causing it to blow up so much more. Because now when I look back at that story when I was 12 years old and I was in Texas, I would have said any day of the week that it was their fault because they said no. That's why I acted how I did. But when reality, if I had a kid now, I was playing on a tournament team that I didn't really know any of the families. We didn't know the families that well at all. And if I had a kid that was trying to stay with other people that I didn't know, I'd say no too. So now with a little bit more maturity, I understand why they said no, and I understand that I was the reason that it blew up so much more. Because so many times we get in conflicts, and it's the passions, it's our own desires inside of us. Because we want our own desires, our own passions, our own selfish ambitions to take priority, we get and butt heads with one another instead of looking from the perspective of the other person. And James wasn't the only person that taught about this. Peter even talked about it. In 1 Peter 2:11, he says, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul." Our flesh is born in sin. It has a sinful nature. And so we want to do sinful things. We want to do selfish things. We want to do these types of things. And it will wage war against the soul, the creator, what God created inside of you. And so I believe that the first realization of really taking forward and understanding that I got to really do nothing with selfish ambition, that I try to do my best to put others before myself, is to realize that a lot of the conflicts you're having, maybe right now in your life, could be possibly you. Philippians 2 verses 3 and 4 says, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of the mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others." Man, if we want to be kingdom-minded, faith-filled believers that are making a difference, that are shining the light of Jesus, then we have to take a step back and put our selfishness aside and come in a way of humility and say, what can I do for other people? What can I do for other people? In your marriage, and a lot of marriages fail because of selfishness on both sides. And it will fail because of that. And a lot of times I've talked with some married couples who have had issues, and I don't know a lot about married life right now. I mean, I've only been married for 4 years. I just celebrated 4 years this past week. But I can tell you one thing in that 4 years is that if we were both selfish, I don't know how we'd last. In everything that we do, we got to be selfless, from the way we communicate, from the way we handle conflict. I mean, even in the marriage bed, you have to be selfless where you're at. And when you're selfless, man, it will bring so much more harmony into your life, so much more peace and joy. It takes a step back and realizing, I need to try my best to put others' interests instead of myself, because sometimes the reason I get in fights might be just because I'm throwing a fit, like I did when I was 12 years old. And so James asked that rhetorical question. And he begins to break down this thought about this Jewish community. He's going to give us a few sentences, if you will, of different issues, I guess you would say issues that were happening that all come with the source of the conflict. The first thing he says, you desire and do not have, so you murder. Remember, he's talking about the Jewish community. And they're actually, theologians have two different sides to taking this passage right here and seeing how they would basically interpret it, because that part at the end is pretty intense, right? So you murder. Well, one group of theologians believe that James is actually being literal right here. That the fighting was so bad and the selfishness was so bad in the church that they were actually leading to fist fighting and killing each other. Some believe that. Others believe, which is a more popular view, and which I would also take this, is that it's a metaphor for the devastating effect that it's having on the local church, the fighting. And I would take that, because if you think about it spiritually, and you think about your desires, it says you desire and do not have. If I desire something and I don't have it, and I get really upset about it because I'm being selfish, and I do that within the church, I'm only going to hurt the potential of the church moving forward, the potential of God's people moving forward and making a difference. I'm only going to do that. I mean, if you think about church splits, maybe you've been a part of one time. Maybe you've seen something go down, or you've heard about them. Man, church splits get ugly. they get ugly quick. And I've heard about one from one of my friends where he had like 300 people coming to his church, and they were making a difference, and they were doing great things in the community. And they had one guy who had a lot of influence, that had a lot of selfishness, that started causing dissension in the church. And the next thing you know it, he decided he was going to start his own church right down the road because they didn't agree. And he brought half the people with him, and the church both of them just subsided for a while. Man, because one person can make a lot of damage like that. There's selfishness in there. It can do a lot of damage. And so it's the devastating effect. You mean you desire, and because maybe that guy desired, and because they didn't do church the way he wanted to, he basically murdered the effect that church could have in the community that they were having. If you look at it about you personally and spiritually in your life, when we put our desires above what God has intended for us, we're killing our identity. You see, we're supposed to be founded in Christ, and God has a purpose for you, so much better than what you can come up with. He has a plan for your life. He has a direction for your life. But when we take our own selfish desires and we go the other way, we're basically murdering the person that God has called us to be, and we're putting it aside. So you desire, you do not have, so you murder. The next thing he says is you covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. If you know the word covet, it's actually one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not covet, meaning not wanting somebody else's lifestyle, their own stuff, their materialistic things, or if you will, not covet. And I guess in this time, there were times, James was talking earlier about partiality, and he was talking about how, we can't make we can't look at people who have high economic status and low economic status different. We need to keep them all the same. And he was teaching about that. And right here, what I can see is if you study and you're studying the scripture, is maybe a lot of and what theologians may think is that some of those guys who were low income were very jealous of the other people's way of living. And it was causing a lot of fight because of that jealousy. And it goes back in our time. It's so easy to get caught up in this. It's so easy to get jealous of your neighbor's stuff, or it's so easy to get jealous of somebody else's lifestyle. You be looking through Facebook and you're so upset, but you see this one person that's always happy, and you get so upset about it, and you're like, man, I wish my life was like that. The Lord doesn't want you to do that. A lot of times the person that you're looking at on Facebook that's always smiling, behind that picture is broken, and you never even realize it. You see, that's why he's saying right here, but that right there, he says, if you desire and you do not have, you're wanting to fight. If you covet, you want somebody else's lifestyle and you can't get it, then you get jealous. He says, and you do not have because you do not ask. So let's remember the audience that James is writing to. James is giving them a reminder right here that believers should ask God for what they seek rather than fighting with one another. Man, we fight because we won't. But James is trying to say, instead of fighting so much for where you're headed, why don't you come together and you pray and you ask the Lord for the guidance? And I think that's what he's talking about right here in this passage, because specifically what they could be fighting about, maybe doctrinal issues or maybe where the local church is headed. And so I'm talking about the time during James in the early church. They could be fighting like that. And so James is trying to tell them, look, stop fighting about the direction you're headed. Instead of fighting, why don't you ask God to give you what you need and you go together? Man, so many times we get fights in our families, and we get in fights in our marriages, and maybe at our workplace, I don't know. But what if, especially in our marriage, that what we're fighting about, we just came together and said, hey, we keep asking for this. Why don't we pray together and we ask the Lord to lead us in this? And it will change. It will change the direction and the healthiness in your marriage, because the Lord wants you to ask. He wants you to pray to him and ask for those things. And when prayer is absent in our life, God's blessings will be absent. So we have to pray from the pure desire inside of us, and pray that God would answer these prayers. Even Jesus talked about it in Matthew 7:7. He told people, he gave it in his word to you to ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. But too many times we complain because of our selfishness and we never even ask the Lord to go before us. So he says, ask, seek, and you'll find. Knock, and the door will be open. But it's not that simple. People are like, well, I ask for $1 million all the time. I pray for the lottery all the time, and I ain't never seen any of a cent of it, right? That's why James says next, he says, you ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You see, I want you to know something, is that God knows the motive of your heart. He knows exactly the motive of your heart. And if you're praying for the $1 million for that lottery, and you're saying that you're going to give it to this and you're going to give it to that, but you never truly even tithe, do you think God understands your motive and was going to trust you with that stewardship? It all comes to stewarding. It's little things like that. He knows the motive of your heart. So God's saying, ask and it'll be given to you, but are you asking from a pure desire of selflessness, or are you asking with selfishness? Because it comes like this, just like King Solomon, right? We talked about him last week and how he prayed that God would give him wisdom. That God would give him wisdom, and the selfish prayer would be just, God, give me wisdom so I can be the smartest guy on the planet. But he didn't pray it like that. He said, God, give me wisdom so that I can lead your people. He asked for wisdom with a purpose. And I believe that if we are to ask and it be given to you, it has to be something that's asked with a purpose that's according to God's will. That's directly according to God's will. And even John kind of talks about that in 1 John 5:14 and 15. He says, and this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the request that we asked of him. So if we can't really know what God's will is, if we don't really understand what it is, or we don't even really understand how to pray for it, how do we know? And as people will ask that, according to his will, praying, I want you to catch something that praying for his will doesn't mean knowing the future. It doesn't mean knowing the future. It means asking according to what the Bible teaches his people scripturally. If we pray scriptural prayers, then we're praying God's will. And I'm going to give it to you like this, 4 quick points. Look at your neighbor for point number 1. Say, pray in faith. This is praying according to God's will. Pray in faith. Pray in faith. James 1:6 says it like this. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. James right here earlier, he's talking about if we're going to pray according to God's will, we have to pray in faith with no doubting. How many times do we pray maybe to be healed or pray for God to do something, but back in our mind we're really doubting if it's going to come true or not? Because our faith is weak. And so what right here he's saying, you got to pray in faith. Praying according to God's will is praying in faith. The next thing is, look at your neighbor, say, pray with patience. This one is the hardest for me to do. It's the hardest probably for a lot of people to do. It's the fact that sometimes the things you're praying for aren't going to happen tomorrow. That sometimes you're going to have to pray and pray and pray, and you might be praying for that coworker next door to get saved for 10 years, or your husband to get saved for 10 years before it ever comes true. But you keep praying, and you consistently pray because you're praying with patience. Luke 18, I don't have this one up for you, but you can mark this down so you can read it in your later, because I don't have that much time to cover all of it. But Luke 18, 1 through 8, it's a parable of the widow, the persistent widow, and how she just keeps praying and keeps praying no matter what's going on in the situation. And it's just that you are going to pray with patience and you're not going to lose heart. You're going to still have faith. Could you imagine what would have happened? You remember the story of the Israelites and they were marching around the walls of Jericho? And don't they have a song with that or something like that? I'm not going to try to sing it. You don't want me to sing it. Y'all all going to leave because I can't sing. Only my wife can sing and in our relationship. But Jericho, they walked around the walls of Jericho. Could you imagine if they'd have stopped on 6? If they'd have stopped on 6, they'd have never saw the miracle that God wanted to have for them. They had to march one more time. If they wouldn't have been persistent, they might have missed what God had for them. It's just like the guy in Elijah when he had his servant and he was looking for the cloud because they had been in a drought for years. And so he sends his servant up to the mountain 6 times. They go up there and he comes back. He's like, man, Elijah, I don't see no cloud. He goes again, I don't see a cloud. I mean, he keeps going. Could you imagine if Elijah told him the 7th time, he said, go look again, and the servant said, no, I ain't going to see it. He'd have missed that the cloud was coming and that the miracle was coming. And I think so many times that we're praying according to God's will and we're praying in faith, but that if we pray with patience and we don't pray with patience, we miss what God has for us. Man, because we start to doubt. So pray with patience. Don't lose heart. Keep praying. Don't stop on 6. Keep going. The next thing is look at your neighbor and say, pray in obedience. Pray in obedience. 1 Peter 3:12 says it like this. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. He's right here. He's like, man, if you want the Lord to bless you, to honor you, you got to live a righteous lifestyle. How many times do people call in the name of the Lord when something's going wrong? Right? Never want to talk to. I've seen that so many times that you never mention Jesus or anything, but the moment you really need something is the moment we get on our hands and knees and start praying, right? But this praying according to God's will doesn't look like praying on God just when we need him. It's praying in faith, it's praying with patience, and it's praying in obedience, a walk in a lifestyle of righteousness. That, yeah, we're going to mess up sometimes. Yeah, we're going to do some things that aren't very smart, but that we love the Lord enough that we're going to keep walking in obedience and praying with that obedience. And the last thing is praying in submission to God's greater wisdom. This is a hard one for some people to grasp. Because you might have been praying and praying and praying for that person who had cancer to be healed, and they died. And they went to be with the Lord. You might have been praying and praying and praying for something to happen, and it just never came true. And the opportunity for it just never happened. Romans 8:28 says it like this. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. I hate it when I hear this passage misinterpreted. Because if you look at this passage, it says, and we know that for those who love God, it says all things work together for the good. It doesn't say that all things are good. That's not right. It's not all good. Look at your neighbor and say, it's not all good. Can I just be real on stage with you? Sometimes life sucks. Sometimes it's horrible. Sometimes it's just, we don't get it, and we don't understand what's going on, and it's just so, like, what's going on? But God didn't say that everything would be good. But he did say that he would work all things for his good. So he did say, I'm going to take a little bit of the bad, I'm going to take a little bit of the good, I'm going to mix it together for his purpose. We might not understand it, and so praying according to God's will means taking a step back in humility and saying, God, you have the greater wisdom. Isaiah says, for his ways are bigger than our ways. He has a higher intellect than we do. We don't understand what he's doing sometimes, but he is at work. He is working. If you're stuck in life right now and you don't understand why or where you're headed, the Lord is working, and you don't give up. Keep pushing forward. So you ask that you don't ask for only. So we're praying in faith. We're praying with patience. We're praying in obedience, and we're praying in submission to God's greater wisdom. Now we're moving on in the passage in James so that we can keep seeing what the source of conflicts, because right there, what I just taught you is how to pray with selflessness. Praying by those 4 points, the source of the conflict is me. The reason that I fight so much, the reason we get in fights so much is because of us, because of the things we say, the things we do, and the things we don't pray for, and the things we don't ask for. And so we're asking for that, and then James just gets like brutal. Man, he gets so brutal with his next statement. You adulterous people. I read that and I was like, dang, this dude's meaning business right now. Like, goodness, you adulterous people. But let me put some clarification to you, because if we just read it from the front, we just think he's talking, man, there must have been a lot of people cheating on their wives and husbands back, but it's not what he's talking about. Adultery right here isn't used like we're talking about. It's actually, that was a common phrase and a common metaphor in the Old Testament to talk about unfaithful people in their walk with the Lord. And I'll show you. In Jeremiah 3, verse 6, it says, this is about the Israelites back in the Old Testament. During the reign of King Josiah, the Lord said to me, have you seen what faithless Israel has done? She has gone up on every high hill and under every spreading tree and has committed adultery there. It's not talking about committing adultery like we think. It's talking about being unfaithful in obedience to the Lord's will. And so when he's saying you adulterous people, he's just saying you people that are being unfaithful, you people that are being selfish, you people that are fighting and quarreling amongst one another. That's who he's referring to right there. And then he goes in and says, I almost see that he's using that phrase as like exposing the true source of their conflict. Like really just letting them know that the source of the conflict was them. And he's pointing it right at them because of their selfishness. And he says, do you not know that friendship with the world is intimacy with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. James again, right here, talking about this sin that's happening in the early church and how that's putting them of the world. And that if we're called for the cause of Christ and to be faith-filled people who are making a difference, then we have to learn not to live of this world, just live in this world according to God's purpose. And he's saying basically what he's packaging right here. He's kind of piggybacking off of Jesus' teaching from the Mount of the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, it says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. Saying you can't love Jesus and love the world. And too many people take that to the extreme. So I'm not supposed to have any fun in this world. I'm not supposed to enjoy anything. I'm supposed to just build walls up around my house and live isolated from everybody because I'm not supposed to be of this world. And da-da-da-da. And I just think that's baloney. Because if Christ called you to go into this world and make disciples, then he didn't call you to stay at your house with isolated walls around you or anything like that. He's called you to be a difference maker in this world, to shine the light in this world. He's called you to be somebody who stands out because you love Christ so much that people see it inside of you. The way you walk is different. The way you talk is different. The way you interact is different because you have Christ living in you. And it's because that you have not befriended the world, but you've befriended the one who's given you life. That I would befriend the Creator, not the creation. And Paul even taught about not living as this world. Romans 12:2, he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by the testing you may discern whether the will of God is what is good and acceptable and perfect. So don't get me wrong. We're to live in this world, but we're not to be of this world. We're to be examples of who Jesus called us to be. Examples of the life he's given us and the joy and the love and the peace that we get to live with. Even when you're living with the Lord, even when it's bad, it's good. And we show that. And the reason we understand that is because we're friends with him. And the next part, as we're closing up today, he says, do you suppose it is no purpose, as the scriptures say, he yearns jealousy over the Spirit that he made to dwell in us. This passage right here is the most theologically complex and debated passage in all of the New Testament. That verse right there. He yearns jealousy over the Spirit he has made to dwell in us. I'm going to tell you what I believe the Lord has showed me about that. And then it says, but he gives more grace. Therefore, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. You see, when we commit our lives to Christ, the Bible says we're a new creation. His Holy Spirit has come inside of us. His Spirit is living with us. He guides you. He walks with you. He comforts you. He helps you. He's doing those things. But have you ever went to go do something you weren't supposed to do and you almost felt like something was right there in your gut saying, I don't think that's the right thing. And you know it? I believe that's God's conviction. And when God's convicting you, I don't